Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Andrew Ettinger, and I'm Director of Education at the National Literacy Trust. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to the opening webinar of the National Year of Reading 2026. It's wonderful and a little scary to see so many of you on the call today. It really reflects the depth of feeling and passion for children's literacy in this country. Before we begin, a little housekeeping. As there are so many of you here today, you won't be able to turn your cameras and microphones on, but the chat function is open and you can put any questions you have there. We won't be able to respond to them immediately, but we'll collate them and then publish a set of responses soon afterwards. The webinar itself will be recorded, and the recording will also be published so that you can refer back to it or share with any colleagues that weren't able to join us here today. Here's a quick snapshot of what we have in store for this term. And you can find this calendar in the starter toolkit, and I'll tell you more about it and how to get to that a little later on. But first, I'm very pleased to hand over to our CEO here at the National Literacy Trust, Jonathan Douglas, who will introduce the year ahead.
And welcome to the National Year of Reading in 2026. Reading is the fundamental skill at the heart of all learning. It's the thing which allows you to unlock your humanity by connecting you with the rest of humankind. It's the source of cultural knowledge. It's a wonderful, wonderful exploration of identity and of meaning. And yet only 1 in 3 children between the ages of 8 and 18 in our country today read for pleasure in their own time. And that is the heart of the challenge to the National Year of Reading. How do we excite a nation to read more? How do we enable a new generation to fall in love with reading? But of course, that challenge isn't simply one of skills. Reading for pleasure is in essence an issue of appetite. And the challenge to the Year of Reading is how we create that self-motivated appetite to read, which we know will actually turn young people into readers for life, and which we know will give them the experience of reading, which will prove so fruitful in terms of their current lives, but also in terms of their future opportunities. So the challenge to the Year of Reading is behaviour change, is the creation of motivation. And in preparation for the Year of Reading, we've spent a lot of time looking at those places and those campaigns where behaviour change has happened successfully. Places like the health sector, places like financial services, and looked at actually what they've learned about changing behaviours, creating motivation. And the key thing, which all those examples have in common, is that they start with people where they are. They start with the motivations and the passions of people in their lives today, and bring that activity close to those people. And that is what the Year of Reading is about. It's not about dragging people into reading activity, it's about taking reading to people's lives where they are today. So go all in. The campaign for the National Year of Reading is about going all into the things that you love. Whether you're passionate about sharks, or Taylor Swift, or Mallory Blackman, or your own well-being, we want you, we want your pupils, we want your families to do more of it during the Year of Reading. Go all into the things you love through the act of reading. And that's why 2 days ago we launched the National Year of Reading at the Emirates Stadium, at Arsenal Stadium, with Liam Williamson and with Theo Walcott. Great footballers taking reading to the heart of the nation's passion, and that's what we'll be doing throughout the year. And we will be celebrating the Year of Reading across society. Businesses, libraries, you name it, the social media channels, television and radio will be getting on board. Fantastic amounts of activity. But at the very heart of the Year of Reading is the relationship between teachers, young people in classrooms, librarians and young people in their school library, practitioners and children in settings. And that is why I'm so pleased to be welcoming you today. The success of the Year of Reading rests on our ability to work with you and create something very, very exciting. We are inviting you to go all in with the activity that is already at the heart of your school, at the heart of your professional vocation. We're inviting you during the Year of Reading to renew your love of reading, which sits at the heart of your vocation as a teacher or as a librarian. We're asking you to go all in and increase and strengthen your personal identity as a reader, which is one of the most powerful resources you have to encourage young people to read. But you're not going on this journey alone. As Andrew says, throughout the year, there will be a bounty of activities, resources and support available. Our aim this year is to build a movement of reading in 2026. Together, we are going all in to the renewal of the national reading culture, but just as importantly, to the renewal of the reading culture of your school, your setting, working with other great charities to support you in your journey, and ultimately to go all in to the power of education to transform lives.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Apologies if there were any sound problems on there. We are sharing a microphone. I hope you can all hear me okay. I'm now very pleased to introduce Dr. Christina Clark, our Director of Research and Evaluation, to tell us more about the research that has highlighted the challenge of young people's reading motivations today.
Bear with me while I share my PowerPoint. There we go. I assume everyone can see this, and thank you, Andrew, and good afternoon, everyone. So today is about setting the context for the National Year of Reading. And before we hear from Teresa, I briefly share what the evidence tells us about reading engagement, what patterns we are seeing now and have done over the past, and why a national response is needed now. To understand why the National Year of Reading matters now, it helps to start with a wider picture. And what the research shows us from our own data and from a wide body of work from across the sector is that there's a generational decline in reading engagement, beginning in the early years and continuing through childhood, adolescence, and into adulthood. We see this in changes to home reading environments, in declining levels of shared reading in the early years, in consistent drops in reading engagement among children and young people, and in adult reading levels. Now, the key point here is that the decline in reading is long-term and systemic. It reflects wider cultural change in how people spend their time, how they access stories and information, and what feels relevant in everyday life. And that context matters because it helps us understand both the scale of the challenge and the kind of response that's needed. Within that wider picture, children and young people's experiences of reading are particularly telling. And when we look more closely at the data, a very clear pattern emerges. We've been tracking children and young people's reading engagement for 20 years, where reading is defined broadly to include books, magazines, newspapers, comics, and other texts read in print or on screen. And what this graph shows is a sustained long-term decline in enjoyment rather than a short-term fluctuation. So if we look at the most recent data, as Jonathan has already said, only 1 in 3 children and young people aged 8 to 18 said in 2025 that they enjoyed reading. And while the most recent year, i.e. 25, shows a smaller drop than the year before, over the past 20 years, enjoyment of reading in free time has fallen by nearly 19 percentage points. And what this tells us is that for many children and young people, reading is becoming less likely to be something they're choosing to do themselves, for themselves. And that's exactly something children and young people themselves describe very clearly. Last year, tens of thousands shared comments with us about their experiences of reading. Now, it's important to say that many talked about the joy that reading brings them. The comments on this slide, however, are representative of the many who told us they don't enjoy reading, not because they reject stories or ideas, but because reading is often competing with options they see as more convenient or more actively engaging. Others describe reading bluntly as something that's simply less important than it used to be, and others talked about it less of a hobby and much more of an obligation. These comments help us understand how reading feels for many children and young people. When we look back at the data, it's clear that enjoyment of reading is not experienced equally. I won't talk through every data point here, but there are some clear patterns to notice. We see differences by age, by gender, and by background, and in some cases, those gaps persist or widen as children get older. For example, enjoyment is higher among girls than boys and higher among younger children compared with older young people. Differences by free school meal background are smaller than some might perhaps expect, but the most recent data suggests that gaps have re-emerged here too. So far, we've looked at enjoyment of reading, but we know this is only part of the picture. Indeed, one might argue that a more practical measure of the status of reading in children's lives is how often they choose to read. So alongside tracking reading enjoyment, we also look at how often children and young people read in their free time, particularly how many read daily. And when we look at that, in many ways, the picture for daily reading is even more challenging than it is for enjoyment. Just 1 in 5 children and young people now say they read something daily in their free time. And more worryingly, over the past 20 years, the number of children and young people who say this has halved. Now, this doesn't mean that children and young people aren't engaging with stories, information, or ideas. Many do so regularly, but often in formats or spaces that don't always feel like reading to them or that aren't recognized as such. As with enjoyment, daily reading in free time varies across different groups of children and young people. And again, I won't talk through every data point, but there are some clear and familiar patterns. We see higher levels of daily reading among girls than boys and among younger children compared with older young people. Differences by free school meal are more pronounced here than they were for enjoyment, and the most recent data suggests those gaps have also widened. And taken together, we can see that some groups are much less likely than others to read regularly in their free time. And this helps us to see that the challenge isn't simply just about encouraging reading or encouraging more reading overall, but about understanding who is being reached, who isn't, and why, which in turn can help us target our efforts in a direction most likely to be of benefit to those groups. So far, we've looked at how much children and young people enjoy reading and how often they read, but we can take it a step further by looking at what motivates children and young people to read in the first place. When they do choose to read, the most common motivations fall into 3 broad areas. Some read for curiosity, i.e., to learn new things, build knowledge, or develop understanding. Others read for mindful reasons, such as escapism or emotional well-being. And others read for social reasons, including connecting with others or exploring issues they care about. But the data also show us that these motivations aren't evenly weighted across age groups. Curiosity becomes more dominant as children get older, while mindful motivations decline with age. And social motivations remain low, relatively low throughout, but rise slightly in their late teens. So motivation matters because reading engagement is closely tied to what reading offers people, and that can shift over time and in different contexts. And understanding motivation therefore helps us see why some forms of reading resonate at certain moments with certain people and why others don't. And if motivation is central to whether children and young people read, then the next question is what helps when motivation is low? When we ask children and young people who don't enjoy reading what would make a difference, their answers are remarkably consistent. Relevance, autonomy, and personal interest matter most. So things like media tie-ins, content linked to hobbies and interest, eye-catching covers and titles, having the freedom to choose what, when, and how to read, and recommendations from trusted people all help. Yet one of the clearest insights here is that many children and young people aren't rejecting reading itself. They're rejecting experiences of reading that don't feel relevant to their lives. And this in turn suggests that this group would benefit from reading being aligned with their personal interests and with other media that they already recognize as part of their broader cultural experiences. So if we step back from the detail, there are three key takeaways from the evidence. First, the tools to re-engage children and young people already exist. Second, the challenge is meeting children and young people where they're now, not where we might wish they were. And third, many aren't rejecting reading, they're rejecting irrelevance. So, the evidence gives us a clear picture of how children and young people experience reading today. However, it also suggests that we need to do things a little bit differently, not by doing more, but by focusing on what really matters. And the National Year of Reading, as Jonathan said, is a shared national movement to support that shift, doing what already works more deliberately, more visibly, and more collectively in a way that feels human, realistic, and inclusive. Before we look at what the National Year of Reading tries to achieve, it's perhaps worth pausing to understand what we mean by reading in this context. And reading in the National Year of Reading is a dynamic practice. It includes engaging with stories, ideas, illustrations, and information across print, digital, and audio formats. It includes connecting with others through shared texts and conversations, and finding personal meaning that relates to the identity, culture, and everyday life. Reading in this context is therefore grounded in choice and agency. It's contemporary, it can be communal, and it's often deeply personal. And it matters because of how it connects to people's real lives and aspirations. And all in all, this definition reflects a broad understanding of reading that many already recognize, and that aligns with how people experience reading in everyday life. And if this is what we mean by reading, then the National Year of Reading is focused on the kinds of experiences we want more people to have. So what does the National Year of Reading ultimately try to support? At its core, it's trying to support a small number of important outcomes. It aims to help more people to see reading as personally meaningful, to choose to read in ways that work for them, and to experience reading as social and connected. Now, these are deliberately broad aims because reading can be meaningful, chosen, and shared in very many different ways. And how does the National Year of Reading work towards its aims? It does this by championing relevant contemporary reading, by amplifying what already works, by working both locally and nationally, and by being guided by insight and evidence. And it's important to note here that the emphasis is on connection and coordination rather than starting from scratch. And finally, what this looks like day to day, therefore, is valuing choice, interest, and relevance. It's about recognizing print, digital, and audio formats. It's about making reading visible, shared, and talked about, and connecting it to identity, well-being, and everyday life. Now, much of this will already feel familiar, and the National Year of Reading really is about bringing together a shared approach and a renewed focus rather than adding more activity. Thank you so much for listening, and it's back over to Andrew. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Christina. It's so important that we're basing our thinking both on the data about the scale of the challenge, but also our responses to those. Christina's slides will be available on the Learning Management System, but also if you go to the National Literacy Trust website, you'll be able to access the research reports about our annual literacy survey as well. So if you want to look into this in more detail, you can do there as well. I'm now incredibly pleased to welcome our keynote speaker, Professor Teresa Cremin of the Open University. Teresa is co-director of the Literacy and Social Justice Centre there and leads the university's Reading for Pleasure Research and Practice Coalition. Teresa and her colleagues, all of whom are former teachers, have been researching ways to motivate readers for many years. We look forward to her keynote today. All good on the slides, Teresa.
I'm delighted to be here with you all. Can you hear me, Andrew? Can you just confirm that?
Yes, we can hear you and see the slides perfectly.
Good. I'm delighted to be here with you all to launch this much needed National Year of Reading, and I've chosen the title Reading for Pleasure, Let's Go All In Together. Today, I'm drawing on international research, almost 2 decades of open university studies, and work with the profession and literacy organisations, and my thanks to all colleagues involved and our funders who are noted here. I thought I'd start by defining the term, for me at least, and like Christina, I see this as volitional reading, driven by the reader's own goals and interests, which may include social and relational ones, in anticipation of some kind of satisfaction. It involves choice and it involves habit. And the World Book Day epithet, Read Your Way, is a great way of summarising this. It's facilitating children and young people's autonomy to read for themselves at their own pace and in their own way and in the forms they choose. To give you a sense of direction, I'm going to be exploring these 3 areas, but focusing mainly on motivating readers, nurturing positive reader identities. I've got 30 minutes to encompass all age phases, and I'll be using the term children to represent them all. but I do go fairly fast, so please come with me and be kind. First, though, let's start with a story, an opportunity to go all in together. I've chosen Nicola Davis's brilliant Every Child a Song, illustrated by Mark Martin, a Wren and Rook book, an imprint of Hachette Children's Group. Every Child a Song by Nicola Davis and Mark Martin. When you were born, a song began. Sometimes it didn't sound much like a song. Sometimes no one could hear it, but it was there in every heartbeat, every breath, tiny, fragile, and unique. A melody the world had never heard before. It needed love to help it grow, to keep it sheltered and protected, nourished, cherished, celebrated. It needed naming and belonging, a home to call its own, and arms to hold it safe in warmth and welcome. And then, with each new step and word, your song picked up its rhythm. It soared, explored, it learned the blue of sky, the green of leaves, the red of dawn and sunset. And all around you, everywhere, other songs are singing. Some are loud, some are quiet, some sing a single note, and some a symphony. Whatever melody a song sings, each one is true and beautiful, unique and special as your own. No song should be worn away to silence. No song should be drowned out, nor stolen and made to sing a tune of darkness, hate, or war. Even among storm and change and danger, every song must be heard above the noise and chaos of the world. Because when every child is born, a song begins. A melody the world has never heard before, unique and tiny, fragile, but never quite alone. For together we raise our voices for the right of every song to sing out loud, bold and unafraid. So small song, sing on, lifelong, sing love, sing joy, sing freedom. Which I think's a tour de force and worth sharing today, because we believe, don't we, or at least I do, that every child has the right to be a reader. It's a right of every single one of us, and let me perhaps explain why. Why reading for pleasure matters. Just move myself off the screen. Thank you. Internationally, studies show that reading, motivation and frequency are associated with reading comprehension and attainment. The skill to read influences the will and vice versa. In effect, they're mutually reinforcing. Studies also reveal that by engaging with text in their own time, readers expand their understanding of the world, gaining insights into different cultures, histories and perspectives. Reading for pleasure has also been shown to enrich children's vocabulary, spoken and written, not solo words only, but phrases too. A melody the world had never heard before. Over time, it provides a bridging function to academic language and sub-technical vocabulary. And additionally, and completely unsurprisingly, the habit of reading augments children's narrative writing. Keen readers have a rich implicit experience of text structure and more. Significantly too, early reading for pleasure is longitudinally associated with cognitive progress in adolescence. So reading for pleasure in your own time also increases psychological well-being. It has social and emotional benefits. Maybe as I read Nicola's book, you experienced a brief moment of relaxation, calm even, at the end of a busy day. The habit of reading is also longitudinally associated with lower levels of hyperactivity, as well as better pro-social behaviour in adolescence. And interestingly, studies to date suggest that fiction makes the most impact on attainment and is seen to nurture empathy, such a crucial skill in our divided world. And furthermore, when reading enjoyment is prioritised and the adults participate as fellow readers, then research shows relational connections of value develop between children and adults. So in sum, reading for pleasure is positively associated with a rich range of benefits. Whilst the evidence here is correlational, not causational, it's both international and it's very substantial. I wonder, which of these were you least aware of. Indeed, the OECD data indicate that reader engagement, a proxy for reading for pleasure, not only mediates gender and SES, but also that low-income teenagers who are highly engaged attain higher reading scores than high-income teenagers who rarely engage. In essence, reading for pleasure, choosing to read and developing the habit is a matter of social justice. However, as we've heard from Christina and Jonathan, is continuing to decline in the UK and internationally, among adults and parents too. An intergenerational decline about which we all need to, and I'm sure do, care deeply. Negative or conflicted attitudes to reading are far more common now. So globally, there's almost a reading for pleasure turn, and governments, including the UK government policies, are increasingly supporting a love of reading. Indeed, in England, it's been mandated since 2014. But clearly, we need to do more. We need to be more strategic, intentional, and evaluate our efforts as we seek to reverse the decline. Although, of course, whether children choose to read is influenced by many, many factors. Some scholars argue that universal use of technology is a key factor, creating a world of edutainment, shallow skimming and scanning, and reducing our capacity for cognitive patience. Poverty and text access, overcrowded curricula, and the backwash of assessment also create challenges, as do myths about reading being a solitary, not a social experience. Nevertheless, I believe we can and we must come together around a shared social justice goal, and that is that education prioritizes proficiency and pleasure, and that notwithstanding the challenges, we aim together to help young people read in their own time, in their own way, and find value in the experience and develop positive reader identities. So let's move on to consider how we might motivate readers in school. Readers who choose to read for learning in life and who don't simply do reading in school. Of course, we cannot make children read in their own time, but we can entice, we can model, we can invite, and we can find out more about their identities as readers. Children's sense of self as readers is closely intertwined with their identities as learners, so how they see themselves and others see them as readers matter. Their reading identities aren't fixed, however, rather they're fluid. They're created through past experience and lived through interaction. The opportunities adults offer, the text, the time, the space for conversation actively shape young people's identities. Intrinsic motivation, reading for myself, for involvement, relaxation, satisfying curiosity, is far more closely associated with reading for pleasure than extrinsic motivation. Yet in schools, extrinsic motivation can tend to dominate, can take over, with many children reading for recognition, for competition, and for grades. Social motivation is valuable too, reading to be connected to others, particularly peers, and that desire for connection and relatedness is a basic psychological need, alongside autonomy and competence according to self-determination theory. And this theory of Ryan and Dess's is extensively applied to reading motivation. But I'd like us to pause for a moment now to apply it to us. I wonder, what motivates you? I expect some of you like to run, watch films, enjoy baking, for example. Maybe these activities give you pleasure. No one makes you jog or bake regularly, however. No one requires you to do so. You exercise your autonomy and you choose how far and fast to go or what you're going to cook. For me, it's mostly brownies, flapjack, tipping, that sort of thing. I'm definitely not a runner. You probably also feel okay about your running or your baking, competent and capable even. And I expect you feel connected to others because you enjoy perhaps the presence of others on that park run. You feel you belong and are part of a community perhaps, or experience satisfaction, as I certainly do, when the family devour all the brownies and it seems they've gone down well. In this way, our psychological needs are met. We're intrinsically motivated to keep running or keep baking, and we may even be prepared to see ourselves as a runner in some way or be seen as a runner or baker by others. When we create the classroom conditions that nurture children's autonomy, competence, and relatedness, and get responsibly involved as adults, we support children's motivation to read, their intrinsic motivation. So what I want to do now in the rest of this talk is examine each one of these to see how we might do just that, motivate forwards. So first, autonomy. Each child's reading journey belongs to them. It's not our journey, the teacher's journey, or the timetable. After all, whose reading is it anyway? So their voices and their views need to be sought and heard and responded to. And our reading practices need to be intentionally responsive and autonomy supportive. Adults who invest in getting to know their readers respect their rights, and they enable the young people to exercise their choice and agency. And one choice might be for this young child to share the experience of reading with others, rereading a popular class read aloud text, or reenacting the story with puppets, or recommending it and rereading it with a friend. It's not about going solo. But readers do need to feel in control. So allowing them to choose what they read, where they sit, with whom during reading time is important. It enables it to become their time. Do they want to read silently or read and share? To create autonomy supportive practices that are responsive, we need to know our readers in the round and develop rich understandings of their sense of self as readers, particularly those who are less engaged. Many schools use our Open University reading surveys to help get to know their readers, and you could, if you wished, use them at the start of the year, helping you discern differences later. But as children often tell us what they think we want to hear, you'll want to use a wider range of tools and surveys, such as observations, reading histories, reading rivers, conferences, and so on, to formatively assess your readers' identities and then attune your provision and your practice accordingly. Once you know more about your readers, you can begin to honour their preferences. For example, offering more audiobook or books or comics, perhaps, and ensuring that the texts available reflect their diverse realities, so the young can see themselves and their lived experiences through the mirror of fiction, poetry, and information texts and others, and understand more about others' worlds and lives through the windows and sliding glass doors of the texts they're encountering, to borrow Rudine Sims Bishop's words. We can also, of course, foster autonomy by regularly offering a choice of read aloud text, so the children get to choose what they feel like hearing today. And those who don't feel like hearing Superworm, for example, might want to borrow it tonight or to read it in the last space in the afternoon. But it's actually rather hard to honour their preferences and offer tailored text provision if we don't have ourselves a rich repertoire of children's texts, or we don't value all texts equally. Text hierarchies have no place here. So do keep reading. This is core subject knowledge for raising readers and a professional, social and moral responsibility on us all. Our talented and our knowledgeable librarians right across the country are key to this. They're expanding staff and student repertoires. They always recommend, but they don't impose, and they always respect children's choices. This Bradford school, an example of autonomy supportive practice, reveals how, responding to disengagement, the assistant head teacher involved the children in creating their own library. She gave a voice to each class and a voice for the pupil change team, the less engaged readers. She listened to the kinds of texts and place they wanted, and she supported the teachers in creating a social space. This enabled the children to guide the development of their library, which was owned, which was led, and was shaped by them. And guess what? Of course, it was used by them extensively. Fueled by this agency and autonomy, a group of them even suggested they might create a playground book bus. They painted it and suggested materials to be included. And in this way, I would argue, their autonomy was nurtured. And the assistant head teacher noted that this group developed increased assurance in talking about reading with others through the process. They began to position themselves as readers and be seen as readers by others. So let's move from autonomy to competence and responsive adult involvement in that context. Many of our young people, as Christina has articulated, have low self-efficacy as readers, negative identities, they lack confidence. They've not yet found what reading is good for them. We need to recognise them as readers, help them feel successful, capable, feel they can do it, and offer positive experiences and affirmative feedback so they want to do it. We can create relaxed spaces to browse and chat about text, spaces in which children can participate as readers on their own terms, voice their views and be recognised by one another as readers. And we need in particular, I think, to reposition the less experienced as capable, giving them, for example, roles, if they wish to take them, as reading buddies for younger readers, reading ambassadors, or playground book monitors, or read aloud at lunchtime. Research indicates, in particular, that in small group contexts, when adults share the process of meaning-making together with the children, this helps readers' competence, and it develops relational connections between the adult and the child. Reading volunteers in the UK daily demonstrate the value of this highly personalised support. Those volunteers who are focused on reading for pleasure, like talented reading teachers and librarians with that very same goal, rarely set tasks or targets. They rarely offer judgments, but they encourage, they guide, they affirm, and they nurture children's self-efficacy. Competence, of course, also develops through making wise choices. So accessible, high-interest texts are absolutely key to this agenda. And whilst ensuring that the tempting text offered, like all of these, which are 2025 award winners, reflect children's interest and abilities is really important, it isn't enough. We need to offer skilled support for browsing, and we need to offer skilled support for dialogue about the text. Not each and every one, not a conversation about every text read, or indeed a wretched book review, but we need to offer that supportive context in which young people feel we're interested in what they're interested in, and we like to talk to them about it. Making time for book recommendations in various ways also helps, supporting successful choices that will create for those young people a legacy of past satisfactions that mean they want to go back and find another funny one, another scary one, or indeed listen to another audio story. And then finally, turning to relatedness, their need for connection to and acceptance as readers by others. This is crucial in motivating readers. Through informal book talk and connecting to adult reading role models, over time, young children can come to see themselves as part of reading communities. Now take us back for a moment to that park run concept when you're blethering with a friend who's park running with you. Not that I have, it has to be said, but a friend Jean does, or did. Then talking to colleagues, or indeed even not talking, but being conscious of their presence and running alongside them, is enabling other role models to support you and that sense of belonging and engagement. And I've always felt this picture has that kind of capturing sense of two boys off to the left, or to the left, equally engaged. Many schools harness the social power of reading through informal book talk. In what the DFE reading framework, when we were writing that, we called it book club time. And this is essentially time for browsing, for exploring and discussing books. Opportunities like new book displays and playing book Jenga, as the staff in these Norfolk and Sheffield schools show, and they found that can trigger casual conversations about reading and casual conversations about being a reader, what it is to be a reader, what it means to be a reader. Informal book talk supports children in building and sustaining social relationships with one another and with adults, and fostering those positive reader identities, those identities that can encourage both motivation and support perseverance when texts get tougher or more challenging, and it would be easy to step away. So talking about our books in common, either those read aloud or read with a friend, also represent a rich resource for low-key conversations and connections. So ensuring your read aloud provision is informal, communal, and offers open spaces for questions and child-led discussions is key. These are not assessed spaces. These are spaces for meaning-making, conversation, laughter, silence while we're waiting for what's going to happen next as the ellipsis holds out and Miss says, after lunch, and everybody moans. That sense of being together in the space is so important. The mutuality of that kind of shared experience normalizes talking about text and can help build a sense of belonging. Research also shows that reading relationships with adults nurture children's desire to read. When teachers and parents, office and kitchen staff, caretakers and midday supervisors, for example, position themselves as fellow readers, then more reciprocal, less hierarchical reader-to-reader relationships develop. Adult investment in young people's reading is crucial, and to nurture a nation of readers, we need to involve everyone, and we need, I think, to join in ourselves. When we do, the young notice. They hear the passion in our voices as we read aloud. They feel valued when we ask for a recommendation from them, and they witness our genuine engagement as readers, as this young 9-year-old did of a teacher at Cherry Hinton. When staff from different departments share their preferences and practices, noting as one does here that she's drawn to narratives that are big questions about society, power and responsibility, students may come to review reading and what it means to be a reader. Such posters will trigger informal conversations and may potentially push back at the notions of reading as an obligation, a should to, an ought, and will also demonstrate the uniqueness of each and every reader, each and every staff reader, and each and every child reader. I wonder, do you think your children see you as a reader? Might you share your favourite books, as this head teacher in Sheffield did? Or maybe share the ones you've given up on, the ones you couldn't finish because for whatever complex reason, they didn't work for you. You could also share a 24-hour read, capturing the different kinds of text you read across 24 hours and the formats, newspapers, Facebook, takeaway menus, whatever it is. Authenticity is key to this. Being the reader you are, not pretending. Not creating some kind of false sense of, I have to be a reader in the year of reading. Just be yourself. As Jonathan started, this is a movement of humanity, of being ourselves authentically coming to the children. In this way, we'll be going all in together, children and adults, and we can experience the effective pleasure of belonging to different kinds of reading communities and affinity groups. It's not as if we're trying to create one reading communities. There'll be multiple reading communities, a group of lads who are reading the latest book in a particular series, a group of adults who are sharing a particular text around if you've not read the names. It's uncomfortable, an adult text, but I do in some ways recommend it, although it's painful. These kinds of communities take time to build. They're relationship strong and they're highly interactive, and they shift reading from being seen as an individual, solo, private pursuit to a much more collaborative, social activity. So, to let me summarise, I've been arguing that to motivate readers, we need to show that we're interested in and care about their views, individually and collectively, so that we can, in response, nurture their autonomy, their competence, and their connections with one another and with us. These strands, of course, operate dynamically and demand very considerable professional nuance and sensitivity to context. This is not about offering routines or non-negotiables. It's about principled practice and full caring adult involvement. Critically, too, it involves monitoring and evaluating our work. After all, this is education, not activity country. Not a series of activities we hope might be fun, but trying to nurture readers through enabling them to feel more competent, have more autonomy, and feel more connected to one another. So, looking forwards briefly, as the year unfolds, I recommend that you might mine the Open University's Reading for Pleasure site. It's almost in its 10th year now, and it has a constantly growing wealth of resources for all age phases. We've got over 1,100 examples of teachers' practice up there, shared by the community, for the community, and all written by teachers. And do consider signing up to our monthly Reading for Pleasure newsletter. The link is being popped in the chat line, I believe. And if you find that you'd value some more strategic and sustained support across the year, then consider our Reading Schools programme, which is one for primary and one for Key Stage 3. Over 400 schools have graduated from this year-long development programme, in which we focus on evidence-informed practice and tracking impact. Again, the link's in the chat line. And if you've already got a rich reading culture, then why not apply for the Reading for Pleasure Quality Mark or the National Reading for Pleasure Awards? To close, I'd like to invite you to join me in making some reading resolutions for 2026. Could you centre young readers' identities and their rights as readers in your practice and in your provision? Could you get more deeply and responsibly involved in Reading for Pleasure, affording it a higher profile and embedding it right through your curriculum? And could you monitor and evaluate the impact of your work, paying particular attention to the least engaged and those who are underserved in wider context? But I do want to add a word of warning here. Please do, as you travel, be strategic about what you plan and you participate in. Make good use of the National Literacy Trust self-reflection tools to help you, and crucially, find out about your children's reader identities and attitudes, not presuming that you know what they think and feel about reading, but seeking their views and perspectives, listening to them, and getting to know your readers in the round. Then, in response, you can select opportunities from the fabulous range on offer across this year, and you can act intentionally on the young people's behalf. To build a nation of readers within and well beyond this year, we need to be working strategically and responsibly. So, let's go all in together, strategically and responsibly. Our young people deserve no less. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Teresa. Always so inspirational, but always so clearly based on evidence and research, and really setting out there some clear, practical suggestions to how we move forward and how we do that strategically together. In a second, I'll say a little bit more detail about the programme that we and our partners are putting in place for you this year, but I just wanted to confirm that we are recording this webinar and we'll send you in a follow-up email in the next day or so a link to that recording, so you can refer back to it or you can share it with your colleagues as you'd like to. So over this course of this year, the programme for the National Year of Reading for Schools and Settings will be structured across 3 themes to support your learning and the development of the culture of reading in your school or setting. For the first term, this term, we'll be supporting you to think about the reading motivations of the children in the room in front of you, how you can know their individual challenges and the steps that may support their reading engagement. In the summer term, we'll be moving on to think about whole school or setting cultures, with a focus where you have one on the school library and making sure that it's a hub of your reading culture. And in the autumn term, we'll be looking at how you can work across your communities and with your local families, with a focus on working even more closely with your local public library. We'll be telling you more about the content of each term's programme in the preceding term. So towards Easter, you'll hear more about the summer term programme, but each term will follow a structure as we're setting out here, going through a structured cycle each term, focusing on, firstly, our Go All In Together events, which will be half-termly broadcast events for your pupils, featuring inspirational appearances from some of our amazing author ambassadors and celebrities. We'll be having a suite of professional development activities, webinars, resources and events to support your learning and practice, as well as signposting you to the support that is available to meet the needs of your pupils and your settings from across the partners that we're gathering together in our coalition for the National Year of Reading. And we'll be having motivational quizzes and challenges for your pupils and students to take part in as well. So for this term, that will look like this. We'll be having our first 2 Go All In Together events. The first in early February, focusing on National Storytelling Week with broadcast events for early years, primary and Key Stage 3. Then in March, to celebrate World Book Day, we'll be having our wonderful footy and bookie quiz for 8 to 12-year-olds to showcase how a passion for sport can lead to reading interest, and it'll be bigger and better than ever this year. We'll also be having a series of professional development webinars and resources showcasing evidence-based approaches and best practice for early years, primary and secondary age children. And we'll be having our amazing National Reading Champion quiz, which for this year is now being offered at both secondary and primary school ages. The senior quiz for 11 to 14-year-olds starts this term. And if you're interested in your school taking part in the senior quiz, then please do sign up soon as spaces are filling up rapidly. And we'll be providing you with some details on the junior quiz later in the year. Details of how to sign up for those quizzes can be found on the National Literacy Trust website. All of this, together with the resources and information about our partner offers, can be found on the National Year of Reading Learning Management System. So I'll now hand over to my colleague, Marie-Clare Kelly, to tell you more about that.
Hi everyone, and just to start off, we have had quite a few questions in the chat about the learning platform. It's not live just yet. It will be going live very imminently. We've got one more technical switch to turn on in the back end that we need to just test out before we go live with it, and we want it all to be perfect. So yeah, sit tight for now and we will be in touch with you. The learning platform is a platform for schools and early years settings who are going all in with us this year. All of the resources, events, and learning will be housed on that learning platform, and it's powered by Moodle and our partners at Catalyst. The schools and settings that have already signed up to go all in will receive login information for this platform very soon, as I've said. And if you haven't already registered and chosen your pathway, we'll be working every day to make sure that you get registered and online as quickly as possible after you have signed up. When you first land on the site, you'll see your dashboard, and that shows you the pathways that you have asked to sign up to. Don't worry if you end up in the wrong pathway, we will make sure that you see access to everything that you need. So if you are an all through school, we'll make sure that you see early years all the way through to secondary, for example. There will be one pathway per term, per phase, following those themes that Andrew mentioned about in the room, in the setting, and in the community. And there will be phase specific resources every step of the way. Your dashboard will show you your school's progress throughout the pathway and also reminders for any upcoming events that you can access. In the pathway itself, you'll see a navigation bar on the left-hand side so that you can navigate straight to the things that you need, as well as a little pop-out drawer on the right with a calendar and links. Here, you will find sign-up forms for every event and all of the resources, and importantly, reflection activities to complete throughout the year. We know that building a reading for pleasure culture is more than a tick box exercise, so those reflection activities form the basis of completing each course and unlocking your certificate for each term. We've also got some digital badges that will pop up in your profile and on your dashboard to mark your progress through the terms. And at the end of each term, you'll receive a certificate to celebrate your participation and some assets to use in your email signatures and more. We've also got some really special prizes for participating schools and a reading culture certificate, which will recognise those schools and settings that have gone above and beyond both this year and at other times. Thank you so much, and I'm really looking forward to working with you all over the coming year.
Thank you so much, Marie-Clare. So now to access this, you can download a starter kit for the year now. You don't have to sign up to the LMS for this. You can, if you just want to get some early information and find out a bit more, if you follow the QR code on the screen now, you'll be able to access the calendar, some self-reflection guides and some assets from the starter kit. But for those of you who do want to get more into this and go all in, please do sign up to the LMS. On this slide here, the first QR code will take you to the sign up page for that learning and management system. The second QR code there is just to access those first resources that I mentioned. But if you want to engage fully in the year or in the whole term, please do sign up to our learning management system now. So thank you all so much for your time this afternoon and for your commitment to children's reading. We're on this journey together. There's a link to an evaluation survey for the webinar in the chat and will be sent out to you. So please do tell us what more we can do to support you as we go all in for the National Year of Reading. Thank you very much. you.